Tonight, President Donald Trump is doubling down. At the NATO summit, he rejected early intelligence that the U.S. attack on Iran set its nuclear program back only a few months. The president says it was a devastating attack that knocked them for a loop. The president also announcing the U.S. will meet with Iran next week, adding he doesn't believe a nuclear deal with Tehran is that necessary. The heat is still on. A record-smashing heat wave hits more than 130 million people from Louisiana up to New Hampshire. A lightning strike in South Carolina injures 20, while Senator Chuck Schumer is treated at the hospital for dehydration. Relief is on the way, though. Thermometers are forecast to plunge a whopping 30 degrees by Friday. Our Lee Goldberg is here to take us through the weather whiplash. A stunning victory here in New York for the Democratic mayoral candidate, a 33-year-old socialist who, if elected in November, would be New York's first Muslim and first Indian-American mayor and the youngest in a century. Zohran Mamdani beating out former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo for the nomination. It's a seismic shift for the city. What could it mean for the Democratic Party overall? A high-stakes CDC meeting today. Health Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr.'s newly appointed committee gathers, expected to make vaccine recommendations for the fall. How will these new advisors, many of them vaccine skeptics, affect the guidelines for your children? And a surprise performance from Taylor Swift last night, her first since buying back her master recordings, leaving fans stunned. We'll show you the reactions of people who were there and tell you why Taylor Swift waited until now to get back on stage.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is Prime with Linsey Davis.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Linsey Davis. Thank you so much for streaming with us. We begin with President Trump at the NATO summit and digging in on his assessment of the U.S. bombings in Iran. The president is saying talks with Iran will resume next week, but he also says it's no longer necessary to reach a nuclear deal, as Trump and his cabinet once again doubled down on the assertion that the weekend bombings obliterated Iran's nuclear weapons operations. And the Defense Intelligence Agency appears to be backing off that leaked report, saying the attacks only set Iran's nuclear programs back by months, saying it was a low-confidence assessment, and it's expected to change as they gather more information. For the first time, Iranian leaders are addressing the damage, saying the country's nuclear installations were badly damaged by the U.S. strikes, and saying the U.S. bombings were, quote, a horrible blow to international diplomacy. We're talking with Republican Senator from Alabama, Katie Britt, about this and more in a moment. But first, let's get to ABC's chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce, with more on what the president is now saying and the moment today when the NATO chief referred to President Trump as daddy.
Tonight on the world stage with America's NATO allies, President Trump insisting the U.S. strikes on Iran decimated the Iranian nuclear program, rejecting a preliminary Pentagon report that sources say showed the program was only set back months.
It was very successful. It was called obliteration.
But sources tell us the early intelligence from the Pentagon indicates at least 2 of the Iranian nuclear facilities targeted were not completely destroyed, and that Iran moved much of its stockpile of near-weapons-grade uranium before the U.S. struck, but the president rejecting that conclusion.
We think we hit them so hard and so fast they didn't get to move.
Tonight, the Defense Intelligence Agency, which produced the report, calling it a preliminary low-confidence assessment, not a final conclusion. The president today actually reading Israel's intelligence, which concludes the U.S. bunker-buster bombs that hit Iran's main nuclear enrichment facility, Fordo, destroyed the site's critical infrastructure and rendered the enrichment facility inoperable. And today, that remarkable moment, NATO's Secretary General calling Trump daddy as the president described his approach to Iran and Israel, Trump seeming to enjoy it.
They're not going to be fighting each other. They've had it. They've had a big fight, like 2 kids in a schoolyard. You know, they fight like hell. You can't stop them. Let them fight for about 2-3 minutes. Then it's easier to stop them.
And then daddy has to sometimes do strong language.
You have to use strong language. Every once in a while you have to use a certain word.
Looking ahead, the president announcing the U.S. will resume talks with Iran next week.
We're going to talk to them next week with Iran. We may sign an agreement. I don't know. To me, I don't think it's that necessary. I mean, they had a war, they fought. Now they're going back to their world. I don't care if I have an agreement or not. I said, Iran will not have nuclear. Well, we blew it up. It's blown up to kingdom come. And so I don't feel very strongly about it.
Quite a different tone now. Mary Bruce joins us now from the Netherlands. And Mary, the president also said U.S. talks with Iran would resume next week. Any signs that that's actually going to happen?
Yeah, Lindsay, it's a good question because while the president says they plan to talk, no face-to-face meetings between the Iranians and the administration appear to be set. We're told Trump's special envoy to the region, Steve Witkoff, has no travel related to this on the books. And tonight, the Iranians are not acknowledging any talks. So while the president says he's happy to talk with Iran, he's made it clear that after these strikes, he doesn't think a long-term nuclear deal is necessary. Lindsay.
Very interesting. All right, Mary Bruce, our thanks to you. Joining us now is Alabama Republican Senator Katie Britt. Senator, thank you so much for coming back on the show. President Trump quickly got Iran and Israel to agree to a ceasefire. You've said that Trump deserves the Nobel Peace Prize. And Trump said today that U.S. officials in Iran will meet over the weekend. Negotiators had made little progress over several months before Israel's attacks. Why do you expect the outcome to change now that U.S. has also dropped bombs on Iran?
Look, I think President Trump understands what's at stake. He has said, look, we need peace in this region. We want to create prosperity. Nobody else, there's no other leader across the entire globe that could have gotten these two parties together. He mentioned it himself. Obviously, this is years and decades long of fighting. And so to bring them to the table, to have them to agree, to try to find a pathway forward is a huge step.
Today, President Trump claimed, quote, total obliteration of Iran's nuclear program. Two people familiar with a preliminary report by the Defense Intelligence Agency told ABC News the strikes did limited damage and that Iran was able to relocate highly enriched uranium stocks before the strikes occurred. Now, the White House has pushed back on that preliminary report, which they say was based off of 1 day's worth of intelligence. Would you say that these strikes were worth it?
Yes, Lindsay, I mean, you know that Iran would not come to the table if this only left a scratch on their nuclear program. Getting them to the table, looking and forging a pathway to peace is a direct result of President Trump making the decision and the incredible work that our men and women in uniform did. We know that collection continues to occur, and we will ultimately at some point know the final outcome. But we know that this brought these two programs together, these two people, these two parties together, and that this program has to cease to exist. President Trump has been saying it, Lindsay, for the last 10 years, that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. We know that that enrichment, the enrichment that you just said they talked about, maybe even leaving the facility, obviously was there. And so making sure that they don't have a program, that we completely and totally dismantle it, still has to be a top priority. And I know it is for this administration, and believe that ultimately they'll get that done.
How concerned are you about the security and safety of the roughly 40,000 American service members who are stationed in the Middle East?
Look, the safety of our servicemen and women always comes first. Clearly, they are all in our prayers. I think Iran knows that when President Trump speaks, they should listen. And so he has said, do not have one attack. We don't want to lose one American lives. And I believe that that will be heeded. Ultimately, if it's not, I believe Iran will pay the consequences. Today is a day for peace. It is a way to forge a pathway forward, one of prosperity for the entire region. That is what is at stake. But it's going to take these two parties working together and actually figuring out how to achieve that. But I think with President Trump and Secretary Rubio at the helm, that will get done.
President Trump said about his so-called big, beautiful budget bill, to my friends in the Senate, lock yourselves in a room if you must. Don't go home. No one goes on vacation until it's done.
That's right.
So, Senator, a question just for you is, will you be watching 4th of July fireworks in Alabama or D.C.?
That's exactly right, Lindsay. Look, we are committed to getting this done. We understand what is at stake. We will not allow the American people to ultimately have the largest tax hike in history hoisted upon them. We understand that President Trump needs the tools to secure our border, to make sure that we have a 21st century defense, that our servicemen and women are the best trained, equipped, and ready across the planet. Just the days and the last few days has shown us and crystallized the need for that, making sure that we're not just energy independent, but energy dominant, and making sure that hard-working Americans can actually keep more of their money and have an opportunity to thrive and live the American dream. I was proud to get some child care provisions included in the bill. I know that when you're looking at what parents are dealing with what hardworking Americans are dealing with, there's no better intersection than dealing with the affordability and accessibility of child care. Republicans heard that, and we are stepping up to the plate. So we are going to work around the clock, nights and weekends, and to your point, for as long as it takes to get it done, to achieve results, and to deliver on what President Trump promised the American people on November 5th.
You've said that you count some Democrats in the Senate among your best friends in the chamber, and you mentioned you're particularly close with Senator Booker. What do you think is the problem? Why can't we see more lawmakers on both sides of the aisle take the time to build friendships with the other party?
Linsey, I think it's critically important that we do that we get to know each other as people and figure out where do we share a common goal? Where do we have common interest that we can work to advance? I think we all owe it to the people we serve when we do share a common goal with someone on the other side of the aisle to get in a room and figure out how to forge a pathway forward. So I think we need more of that where we talk about the issue and figure out how we can get in a room and move it forward. And I'm certainly committed to doing that with people on both sides of the aisle.
Senator Katie Britt can't thank you enough for coming on the show. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We are in the third straight day of blistering heat in the Northeast, bringing with it life-threatening conditions for more than 130 million Americans. New York City has reported a spike in emergency room visits, and New York Senator Chuck Schumer was treated this morning at the hospital in Washington, D.C. for dehydration, returning to work soon thereafter, reminding people to drink some water and stay out of the heat. In South Carolina, a single bolt of heat-fueled lightning struck a lake, which injured 20 people, including 12 children. Meteorologist Lee Goldberg with the big change on the way in a moment. But first, ABC's Janae Norman with the heat alerts that are still in place.
Tonight, grueling temperatures taking a toll. Newark, 103. Boston, 102. Providence, 100. Multiple all-time June heat records shattered this week. In Philadelphia, it felt like 106, the third day in a row of triple digits.
It's so hot. It's extra hot. It's like 1,000 degrees out here, figure of speech, but it's hot.
Commuters there sweating the heat and the delays. Trains slowed over fears of warped tracks and those overhead wires.
Those can sag in this extreme heat, and if you're going too fast, the trains can sometimes snag that and pull those wires down.
Outside Philly, hazmat crews braving the heat, responding to a roof collapse and ammonia release at a commercial food facility in Upper Deerfield Township, New Jersey. It's unclear if the heat contributed to the collapse. Emergency rooms in New York City seeing a spike in ER visits. Officials say the heat put 112 people in the emergency room Tuesday.
So after days of this kind of heat, construction crews like this, they're taking breaks more often just to stay safe.
Outside St. Louis, a 55-year-old woman was found dead Monday after going days without electricity. West of Columbia, South Carolina, 20 people hurt, including 12 children, after lightning struck near the Lake Murray Dam. And for so many hitting the beach for relief, a warning to secure those umbrellas. In Asbury Park, New Jersey, a female lifeguard's shoulder impaled by a flying beach umbrella. She's expected to survive.
Janae Norman on the heat beat for us this week. Thank you, Janae. Let's get right to Chief Meteorologist Lee Goldberg of our New York station WABC. And Lee, the temperatures are set to drop, but how long will this reprieve last?
Well, Lindsay, we're going to cool down for the foreseeable future in the Northeast. I don't see a repeat of the extreme heat into next week. We're going to bounce right back in the South and into the Midwest. We're just not going to get to the levels we've seen this week. Heat alerts continue from the Gulf Coast to the Northeast. Remember, we broke all-time June records in the Northeast, and we're already seeing some storms move through the New York area into Pennsylvania, and then some storms out in the Midwest as well. But these feels-like readings are still going to be oppressive into the evening hours, and there's not much relief for one more night. Even tomorrow morning still feels like 80s and 90s. Mid-Atlantic into the Tennessee Valley, and then the relief starts to arrive. So when you think about the peak temperatures in Boston around 100, it's a 30-degree drop as we go into Thursday. We might not get out of the 60s on Friday. Similar for New York, 70s Thursday, maybe 60s, low 70s on Friday. Even D.C. drops into the 80s. Now, there's some severe weather to talk about. I talked about the storms in Pennsylvania. Well, we have a tornado watch in the upper Midwest. There's also severe potential across the Carolinas, and all these storms of the front coming into the Northeast to assist in this cool down as we go into the weekend. Lindsay?
We'll take it. All right, Lee Goldberg, our thanks to you. Now to the fiery midair scare from a smoking engine on an American Airlines flight. Armola Lange reports.
Tonight, alarming video showing flames and smoke shooting out of this American Airlines jet mid-flight.
American 1665, same tension. Looks like that flames coming out of the engine. Yeah, we're going to have to return.
The Airbus A321 took off from Las Vegas this morning, headed for Charlotte. The crew reporting an engine issue just after takeoff, forcing an immediate turnaround.
There was a loud boom. It caused me to immediately look up.
Mark Jackson filmed this video after first thinking he'd heard fireworks.
It was still very low to the ground, So I immediately was like, oh my gosh, I'm about to like witness a plane crash.
American Airlines says the aircraft experienced a mechanical issue. It returned to the airport and taxied to the gate under its own power, where its 153 passengers deplaned normally, adding the aircraft was taken out of service to be evaluated by our maintenance team.
Our thanks to Molangi. The newly appointed CDC Vaccine Advisory Committee gathered today to determine the nation's vaccine recommendations for the fall. It's the group's first meeting since Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. fired all 17 of the former members. And on Capitol Hill, there was a tense confirmation hearing for the CDC director nominee today, who is promising to be an independent thinker. ABC's Steve Osunsami is at the CDC in Atlanta tonight. Steve, this new advisory panel, what recommendations could they make in these 2 days?
Well, one of the things we're looking for is a potential flu vaccine recommendations, essentially vaccines for the winter cold season. And, you know, this advisory panel has been under a lot of criticism, a lot of outrage about how they were appointed. A number of people in and out of public health concerned that RFK Jr., the health secretary, fired the old panel, all 17 of them, and then replaced them with these members, some of whom have shared some of his questions about the efficacy and use of vaccines in America. Linsey?
And a lot of controversy, of course, over the appointment of these members, as you just touched on. What was the reaction today from the advisory panel on this?
So the first thing that the chair of the advisory panel shared today is that they have been tasked to use evidence-based medicine to make their recommendations. It was essentially an answer to many of their critics. But at the same time, they also gave life to some of their critics' concerns by saying that vaccines aren't always good or always bad. So there are going to be a lot of people who question whatever they recommend to the CDC. And just to underline the importance of this panel and to remind everyone, Linsey, if you remember, we were standing outside the CDC where I'm standing right now. During COVID, it was the advisory panel meetings that decided what vaccines Americans used, which Americans got them first. They sort of made all of those recommendations that were so important at that time. And so the importance of this advisory panel just can't be understated.
And certainly remember you right there outside of the building during that turbulent time. Steve Osunsami, our thanks to you. And now let's bring in ABC News medical correspondent Dr. Darian Sutton. Dr. Sutton, thanks for joining us. So just give us a sense of your reaction today from what we heard from the panel.
Well, when you're looking at this panel, you have to understand that they play a critical role in vaccine access. We're talking about guidelines for schools, clinical practice for physicians, but Linsey, most importantly, vaccine access, making vaccines affordable. Their decisions most often come with insurance coverage, and they also are crucial in deciding the vaccines available through the Free Vaccines for Children program. This helps to provide vaccines for children who have families who are underinsured or no insurance or have low income. And an important history note, this program was started in 1994 as a result of the measles outbreak of the 1990s. It was during that time that we saw 55,000 children infected with measles, at least 120 deaths, most of whom were unvaccinated. And it was found that cost and lack of insurance were the key barriers to access to timely vaccination. Here we are today in 2025, days away from likely reaching the highest number of cases of measles that we've seen since 1992. So it's an important understanding when you look at the campaign that RFK Jr., our Health and Human Services Secretary, talked a lot about a revolution forward, but very much we're looking at the signs of a regression backward to an era of preventable disease.
So what kind of impact will their recommendations have on access? And as you talked about, insurance companies, will they pay for them?
And that's the question. The American Academy of Pediatrics has stated today that they're going to continue to provide vaccine recommendations based off of the available data and evidence. As we understand, the Academy of Pediatrics has worked closely historically with the advisory committee to develop the current vaccine policies that we have in place. The question here is, will that change dependent on states if the recommendations from the advisory committee change? And will that lead to a patchwork consistency of helping people get access to vaccines? That's still not yet understood, but that very much can lead to more preventable disease.
So when I'm thinking about parents right now, this is going to cause a lot of confusion. Yeah. What do you recommend for parents who are perhaps going to see their pediatrician, or they're going to listen maybe to the panel if they are skeptical about vaccines?
You know, I would advise parents, number one, there's a ton of noise right now, but there's very little new evidence. This is not about groundbreaking research. This is not about a study that has come out and shown us something that is different. This is about people sharing opinions. And it's important to understand that data is what separates our opinions from realistic outcomes, where we're trying to use evidence-based background to make informed decisions for patients. So my advice to parents is to talk to your providers, talk to your pediatricians. They have the evidence, they have the data. Ask about risk and make your decision, and an informed one, from someone who has the experience and the academic background to be able to give you that information.
Very helpful information there, Dr. Sutton. Thank you so much, as always.
Of course.
Now to the stunning results of the Democratic primary for mayor here in New York City. 33-year-old Democratic Socialist State Assemblyman Zohran Mamdani, who is also Muslim, defeated nearly a dozen other candidates, including former Governor Andrew Cuomo. The results roiling politics here in the city and perhaps shaking up party politics across the country. We'll get to our political director, Avery Harper, in a moment. But first, here's our senior political correspondent, Rachel Scott, with Zohran Mamdani tonight.
Tonight, the political earthquake in America's largest city reverberating for Democrats across the country.
Tonight, we made history.
33-year-old Zohran Mamdani, who just weeks ago was a little-known state assemblyman, pulling off an upset win in the Democratic primary for mayor.
We have given our city permission to believe again.
Mamdani defeating former Governor Andrew Cuomo, who was hoping for a political comeback after resigning in disgrace amid a sexual harassment scandal.
Tonight is his night. He deserved it. He won.
Mamdani's campaign laser focused on making New York more affordable, a strategy he tells me could be a blueprint for Democrats.
I think there's a question of how we return back to what made so many of us proud to be Democrats.
How do you do that?
And I think it's that focus on an economic agenda, on ensuring that people can do more than just struggle.
You know, the Democratic Party is said to be at a crossroads at this moment. What lessons can the Democratic Party take from your campaign?
That people are hungry for a different kind of politics, a politics that puts working people first. And that's what I found in neighborhoods across the 5 boroughs, not just the ones that are considered progressives, but where New Yorkers at large wanted a city that they could afford. And they're tired of living in the most expensive city in the United States of America. And that's something that I know isn't just specific to these 5 boroughs.
Mamdani, who proudly calls himself a Democratic Socialist, campaigned on freezing rent, making buses free, and opening city-run supermarkets.
What do you say to those Democrats who have concerns about that term, Democratic Socialist, that you so proudly claim you are?
I would say that I hear them because there's room to have disagreement and tension in any one party. And there are going to be many Democrats, both here in this city and across the country, who have a different lens of what it is that they see us needing in this moment. But ultimately, we agree on the importance of addressing affordability. And that's at the core of our campaign.
In November, he'll face the city's current mayor, Eric Adams.
He's a snake oil salesman. He will say and do anything to get elected.
Adams was indicted on corruption charges, which were later dismissed by the Trump administration. Trump going on the attack.
So President Trump
just waited and called you a communist lunatic.
What do you say to that?
You know, this is not the first time that President Trump is going to comment on myself. He ran a presidential campaign in part speaking about the necessity of making groceries cheaper and to make cost of living more navigable for so many. He's shown himself uninterested and unable to deliver on that.
And Rachel Scott joins us now here in studio. Always good to have you, Rachel. So you were there with Mamdani when President Trump unleashed those comments. What was his reaction?
It happened right in the middle of our interview. And so I pulled up the president's social media post and I read it to him. And I said, he's calling you a communist. And he kind of laughed a little bit and was like, well, he should have just called me a socialist. At least that would be true here. This is an interesting strategy here. He did not rule out basically not working with the president should he actually win the general election and become mayor, something he would obviously have to do if there are periods of crisis, especially here in New York City. But it's an interesting approach and almost like he wants to run as a contrast to Eric Adams, who we know has really warmed up to President Trump in recent weeks. The big question, though, Linsey, just speaking with him and talking about the future of the Democratic Party, he almost seemed to acknowledge that this is not a one-size-fits-all, that what happens here in New York City may not be sort of like this banner headline for the rest of the country, but he does believe there needs to be new, younger leaders. And notably, he says the Democratic Party needs to focus back on the economy, which, as you and I both know, is a winning issue for President Trump in November.
It sure is. And very interesting to see if this local race has nationwide implications for the next election cycle. All right, Rachel Scott, thanks so much.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Mamdani's win in the primary was a seismic shift to the left for New York City's Democratic Party and possibly for the Democratic Party overall. Let's bring in ABC News political director Avery Harper for more. Avery, thanks for joining us. What does his win mean for the Democratic Party, and could there be broader implications come Election Day in November?
Right. I do think that this race was really reflective of the conversation that Democrats are having nationally about how to rebuild. Should they stick with trying to appeal to more moderate voters, or should they double down on progressive ideas? Should they look to the old guard, or should they be trying to usher in a new generation of leadership? At least here in New York, what we've seen is that the enthusiasm in the party is with the young and the progressive. It remains to be seen if that would work in other parts of the country. And it's unclear if it's really reflective of the national sentiment of Democratic voters.
On Election Day, Mamdani will likely face off against Republican Curtis Sliwa and current Mayor Eric Adams, who's seeking re-election as an independent. Is there a world where Andrew Cuomo runs as an independent himself in the fall and this becomes a closer race?
Right. It is possible. We could see former Governor Andrew Cuomo run on an alternative party line called the Fight and Deliver party line. Last night in his remarks, he did say that he and his team are going to look at the numbers and weigh his options as they look toward November. So it is possible that New York voters will have lots of familiar choices on the ballot. And is it going to be a challenge for Zohran Mamdani? Possibly. Typically, the person who comes out on top of the Democratic mayoral primary has it smooth sailing to victory in November. But because there are some voters who are wary of Mamdani's progressive values and ideas, these other choices might give those voters shelter.
It'll be interesting to see if this election has wider implications nationwide. ABC News political director Avery Harper, we thank you so much. Shocking video today showed a dangerous situation at a home in Ohio. As first responders worked to extinguish a fire from an initial blast, there was then a second explosion. Our Stephanie Ramos has that story.
Tonight, multiple people injured, including 3 firefighters, after this fiery home blast in Ohio, just outside of Columbus.
I have a report of a house explosion. Caller advised that the house is partially collapsed.
Flames and thick smoke smothering the house before 7 a.m. today.
I heard this boom, and I thought, geez, did something run into a house or something? So I came to the front door, and I looked across the street at their house, and it was half gone.
First responders finding a woman and a man outside the home, the man with extensive burns. Both were taken to the hospital. Fire crews working to extinguish the inferno when this second explosion went off.
We just had another explosion. We have multiple firefighters hurt.
Debris from the blast injuring 3 firefighters. Their conditions were not immediately known. Tonight, authorities say the explosions appear to be accidental.
Our thanks to Stephanie. Closing arguments are expected tomorrow in the trial of Sean Diddy Combs. After more than a month of testimony, they come as prosecutors today dropped kidnapping and attempted arson as underlying crimes for the racketeering conspiracy charge Combs is facing. In the final round of arguments, prosecutors honed in on the alleged freak-offs Combs organized, while the defense opted not to call any witnesses. Jury deliberations could start as early as Friday. A DoorDash executive was one of 8 people killed in that tragic boating accident on Lake Tahoe over the weekend. Josh Pickles, the global head of strategic sourcing and procurement for the food delivery company, was out with family and friends on Saturday when his boat capsized during a sudden storm. 2 people were rescued immediately after the boat flipped. Josh Pickles' parents and uncle were among those who also lost their lives. Still ahead, the new evidence that prosecutors say could prove Colorado husband and father Barry Morphew murdered his wife, and what a new poll reveals about the country's birth rate. That's in tonight's By the Numbers. Welcome back, everyone. Younger Americans are planning to have fewer children now than in the past. Tonight, we take a look at what the reasons could be for that by the numbers. According to Pew Research, the total number of children that women and men ages 20 to 39 plan to have on average has dropped since 2012. That year, women and men between those ages on average plan to have 2.3 children. Fast forward 11 years, and that number has dropped to 1.8. Now, you might be wondering, why is that so significant? The number 2.1 is actually critical. That's the average number of children per woman that a population needs to replace itself over time. According to the CDC, 3.6 million babies were born last year in the U.S., which is near the record low from the prior year. The pronatalism movement is trying to change that, and the Trump administration has floated a $5,000 baby bonus to try to convince families to have more kids. Trump's Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, a father of 9 himself, on his podcast endorsed the idea and said, "Make families great again." A study from LendingTree found that the average cost to raise a child over 18 years is nearly $300,000. Experts say some of the reasons behind a decline could be the rising cost of childcare and a lack of consistent paid parental leave. Coming up, the baseball superstar now officially making history in the NBA. And they belong with her. The surprise show in Nashville, why this impromptu performance was so significant. Tonight, a husband and father is facing a murder charge for the second time. Barry Morphew's wife, Suzanne, was found dead after the Colorado mother of 2 went missing. This time, prosecutors say they have new evidence that points straight at Morphew. Our Juju Chang has the latest in the case that has captured national attention.
The grand jury has indicted Barry Morphew on the single count of murder in the first degree.
Yet another stunning twist in the case of Suzanne Morphew, a Colorado mom of 2 who went missing on Mother's Day in 2020. Her husband, Barry Morphew, now charged a second time for her murder.
It has been a long road, but I can tell you that our law enforcement officers have never forgotten, have never given up, and they have been working so hard to get to the place where we are today.
This latest update, years in the making.
With a case that's been simmering for almost half a decade, the death of Suzanne Morphew has all of the hallmarks of a true crime case. A husband, a missing wife, a suspicious death, a body that wasn't recovered until some years later.
The case has topped headlines and captivated the public.
A twist in the case of a missing Colorado mom.
New developments tonight in the disappearance of that Colorado mom.
Barry Morphew was initially charged with first-degree murder and evidence tampering 4 years ago. Those charges later dropped just days before his trial was set to begin.
In 2022, the prosecution dropped the case against Barry Morphew because there was a number of holes within their case. There were some evidentiary issues that they were precluded from presenting, but probably the most serious part of it, it didn't have a body. No cause or manner of death to really explain what happened to Susan Morphew.
In 2023, Morphew spoke exclusively to ABC News with his daughters Mallory and Macy by his side, maintaining his innocence and claiming his life had been ruined by the allegations.
Did you have anything to do with the disappearance of your wife?
Absolutely not.
You never had a shred of doubt that your dad was completely innocent?
I've never had a shred of doubt. Not one.
It all began on Mother's Day 2020. Suzanne's family says she went on a solo bike ride near their home in Salida, Colorado, then vanished. When the 49-year-old didn't return, Barry Morphew asked a neighbor to call police. At the time, Morphew was reportedly near Denver, over 3 hours away.
If anyone is out there that can hear this, that has you, please, no questions asked, however much they want. I will do whatever it takes to get you back. Honey, I love you.
Was there any indication before she disappeared that something was amiss?
No. Macy and I were texting her on her road trip, having the sweetest conversations and sending her pictures of the fun that we were having.
Did you observe any fights, arguments, disagreements between your mom and your dad that concerned you before?
No.
Before her disappearance, Suzanne was fighting cancer.
I know that she was going through chemotherapy for the last couple of years before her disappearance, and I know she was going through some hard things and made some some bad decisions. But
what kind of bad decisions?
She was really having trouble with the chemotherapy and the drugs.
Prosecutors say Suzanne was having an affair with a high school friend who authorities ruled out as a suspect.
When you found out that Suzanne was having an affair, what was your first thought?
My heart was broke. My heart was broken. I didn't believe it. Anybody that knows her wouldn't have believed it, and I didn't believe it until they showed me proof. I made them prove it because they kept lying to me about other things. I thought, well, this is another lie to get me to say something, and I made them prove it. And it was just heartbreaking.
Morphew denied the marriage was in trouble.
We had a wonderful life, wonderful marriage. She was just so loving and giving and such a good mother.
But a 100-plus page affidavit from the district attorney filed in May 2021 presents a different story. Prosecutors offering texts which appear to show a strained marriage, Suzanne referring to her husband as Jekyll and Hyde, and just before she disappeared, telling him, "I'm done." Suzanne's sister telling an FBI investigator that in the months leading up to her disappearance, Suzanne had come to realize what a narcissist her husband Barry was. And she shared a text message she says Suzanne sent her just days before she was reported missing, saying he's also been abusive emotionally and physically.
She revealed to me that she had really kind of come out of her denial about her marriage and that there was a lot of unrest in the home.
According to the affidavit, Melinda told investigators when she found out that Suzanne was missing, she said, "Damn it, damn it, damn it," to herself because she was certain that Barry killed her. In that same affidavit, authorities saying Barry Morphew denied any physical abuse or altercations between Suzanne and him.
I absolutely believe Barry Morphew was involved in my sister's death and disappearance.
In September 2023, more than a year after the initial charges against Barry Morphew were dropped, and just months after his interview with ABC, authorities say they discovered Suzanne's remains in a shallow grave, 45 miles south of the family home.
A major development in the case of Suzanne Morphew. 3 years later, officials say they've found her remains.
Cracking the cold case wide open, raising new questions about what happened to the Colorado mom and who is responsible.
The toxicology report officially determining Suzanne's death a homicide and finding a chemical cocktail consistent with an animal tranquilizer known as BAM in her bones, noting these drugs are marketed as a compounded injectable chemical immobilizer for wildlife. According to the new indictment, prescription records show that when Suzanne Morphew disappeared, only one private citizen living in that entire area of the state had access to BAM, Barry Morphew.
The most shocking part of this indictment is how the prosecution is tying this all together through what was found in Suzanne Morphew's body. This compound of drugs within her system. Barry Morphew has access to BAM, the tranquilizer cocktail, because it's used to transport deer from one location to another. And he's admitted to not only having the drug, but using it on his deer farm.
The indictment also alleging there were other contradictions in Morphew's statement about being at a job site during the time of his wife's disappearance, saying video evidence shows he was there for less than 30 minutes and seen placing items in multiple trash cans. His lawyer telling ABC News, yet again the government allows their predetermined conclusion to lead their search for evidence. Barry maintains his innocence. The case has not changed, and the outcome will not either. Morphew is currently in custody in Arizona, awaiting extradition back to Colorado.
Our thanks to Juju Chang for that. Still to come, an unbelievable risk turns into an incredible rescue. What led a mother to desperately toss her baby out of a window? Plus, finding his rhythm, artist, actor, and Broadway star and producer Frankie Grande joins us to talk about his space-inspired debut album. The historic launch introducing new nations to the International Space Station. Dramatic moments as a woman tosses a baby from a burning building. And Taylor Swift stuns Nashville with a surprise performance. These stories and more in tonight's Rundown.
ignition and lift go.
So began the journey for 4 private astronauts for Axiom Space overnight, lifting off from NASA's Kennedy Space Center on their way to the International Space Station. After multiple postponed launches, the crew lifted off aboard a SpaceX Dragon launched by a Falcon 9 rocket and is expected to arrive at the space station Thursday morning. Peggy Whitson is commanding the mission with astronauts from Poland, India, and Hungary. It is the first time astronauts from those 3 countries are visiting the ISS. Former baseball star Alex Rodriguez is officially entering the basketball world. The NBA's Board of Governors approved the $1.5 billion sale of the Minnesota Timberwolves and WNBA's Minnesota Lynx to an investment group led by Rodriguez and Mark Lohr. The approval ends a 4-year-long process. Dramatic video shows residents of a Cleveland apartment building escaping after an explosion that led to a fire this week. One video shows a child being tossed out of a window into a crowd waiting below. That child is reportedly okay. Another video shows a resident climbing down from another unit. 5 people were hospitalized from the incident, which is still under investigation. Louisiana's Attorney General has filed multiple lawsuits against pharmaceutical giant CVS. One accuses CVS of abusing customer information when it reportedly sent customers text messages urging opposition to a bill that would have prevented pharmacy benefit managers like CVS from owning retail drugstores in Louisiana. Other lawsuits accuse CVS of using its market position to impact drug costs and hurt independent pharmacies in the state. CVS is disputing all the claims and says their communications with customers were consistent with state law. Officials in New Jersey say a lifeguard was impaled with a beach umbrella at Asbury Park. The fire department said the umbrella went through the woman's left shoulder and came out of her back. They were able to cut down the 6-foot umbrella a bit before she was taken to a hospital and have it removed. Police say the lifeguard was alert and conscious and told them that she was impaled while trying to grab the umbrella from falling after a gust of wind blew it off its stand. A surprise performance from Taylor Swift. The pop star joined Kane Brown on stage at Nashville's Brooklyn Bowl to sing her hit Shake It Off. The performance was part of the Tight Ends and Friends event, which is part of the annual Tight End University training camp, led in part by her boyfriend, Kansas City Chiefs tight end Travis Kelce. The performance was also first for Swift since she bought back her Masters last month. Now to our segment, Prime Playlist Shuffle, where we sit down with the artists who are transforming the music industry. Artist, actor, and Broadway star and producer Frankie Grande is entering a new chapter of his career, channeling his raw emotions with 80s dance-style synths and electronic beats. He's out now with his debut album titled Hotel Rock Bottom, an album that just might get people out on the dance floor. Let's take a listen.
It's your rhythm of love that's lifted me up deep into the night. It's your rhythm of love that runs through my blood and keeps me alive. It's the rhythm of love. It's the rhythm of love.
Let's keep the party going. Frankie Grande joins us now. Sometimes musicians actually don't move to their own music, which I'm always surprised. But you were putting on the whole show for us.
Yes, you know, I love my choreography so much. It's just in my body right now. So I was like, immediately I started, I was like, and you know, I'm a dancer. So
5, 6, 7, 8.
Here we go.
So that was Rhythm of Love.
Yes.
Where did you come up with the inspiration for not only the song, but also the video?
Oh my goodness. You know, the whole album is kind of a love letter to my journey. I'm 8 years sober now, and the journey has been long. And the title track, Hotel Rock Bottom, is that moment where I made that decision, like, am I gonna get sober and go to rehab, or am I going to basically check out of life? And so Rhythm of Love actually takes place earlier in my journey. It's cool writing an album at this stage of my life because I've lived so much of it already. So Rhythm of Love is about a time where I knew sobriety existed. I had a sober community, but I wasn't ready to make that choice yet. And they're the ones that were lifting me up deep into the night.
There are so many people who look up to you, obviously, and may be struggling with addiction or trying to be sober. What kind of advice? I mean, because of course there are a lot of people in your ear, parents, family, loved ones who are trying to tell you, but is there anything that you might be able to say to help that person? Yeah,
I would say don't be afraid to ask for help. It is the hardest thing you'll ever do. I did not want to do it. I was raised to do everything myself. It's fine. You can do it yourself. You can figure it out. But I couldn't figure this out. And so I finally had the moment where I was just like, I have to ask for help. I went to my sister first and then to my mom, and they were immediately there for me. They knew how to help me. And so I'm just saying, if you're out there and you're struggling, like find someone that you can tell, ask for help, and I promise you help will be there. Help will be there.
Helpful advice. Now, back to the music. You describe this as space dance pop rock.
Yes.
Now, I think we can get the dance pop rock, but the space, where does that come from?
So I'm a huge sci-fi fantasy nerd. Like all my tattoos are covered my body. Like I have Star Wars over here, but you know, we're on ABC, so I'm allowed to show it. There you go, Star Wars, you own it. So I'm really grateful that I was in the studio with my executive producer, and I was like, it needs more Epcot sounds. Like my whole childhood was Captain EO in Epcot. So I wanted those sounds to be included in the album. So there's a lot of like, like all those kind of like very spacey sounds that make me happy. So it just brings me joy. Now,
another thing that brings you joy and people know you for is acting, whether it was in Big Brother or on Broadway with Mamma Mia, Rock of Ages. So do you think that your fans should expect that you're getting rid of the acting side and just going to the music, or still both?
Well, I mean, if you see my music videos, you'll see that I'm like very much acting. I will always be an actor. I'll always be a dancer. I'll always be a singer. I'll always be all three. And I'm looking forward to always channeling all three in anything that I do moving forward.
LA, DC, Boston, you've been performing in Pride festivals across the country. Where can your fans see you next? And might Ariana be joining you on any of these?
Oh my goodness, I can't spill all the tea right now.
Okay.
But you know, my sister and I are so unbelievably close, and her role in helping me has been amazing because, like, you know, I have that font of knowledge right in front of me. You know, she used to be at the stage door waiting for me at Mamma Mia, and then I was at the stage door waiting for her after her concert.
So sweet.
She's been really unbelievably helpful. Next up, I'll be in Seattle Pride.
Okay.
And then hopefully on tour somewhere. We'll see.
All right. I think that's in the future for you.
Thank you.
Frankie Grande, we thank you so much for coming by. Just what a great spirit you have. Frankie's new album, Hotel Rock Bottom, will be released this Friday, June 27th, streaming on all platforms. And that is our show for this hour. I'm Linsey Davis. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of today's top stories. Thanks so much for streaming with us.